From the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, this is Potomac Watch.
Welcome back. The point about case by case is an interesting one because the administration will probably argue in court that they are doing this on a case by case basis, and the announcement that sets forth the terms and who is applicable, who they're applicable to, is just the announcement of how they're going to enact the policy. And I guess I would point back to this fact sheet on the military members. It does say that in order to request parole in place, you'll need to complete this form, you'll need to provide copies of documents and so forth. And so that, again, goes back to this requirement of doing this on a case-by-case basis. But it also does set forth some broad categories of people to whom this will apply. Again, if you are a spouse, widower, parent, son, or daughter of an active duty member of the U.S. Armed Forces. And this is a point that has come up in litigation on DACA and also DAPA, the Deferred Action for Parents of Americans, is at what point is an administration acting in such a way that even if they are bringing in applications and saying, we're not going to give out the status on our own, we need to see documents from you, and so that makes it a case-by-case event. At what point does it sweep so broadly that it starts to undermine the clear intention of the law and the clear intention of Congress when it says that there is parole that the executive can give out on a case-by-case basis for urgent humanitarian reasons? And Kim, do you think that a legal challenge to this by President Biden is all but inevitable? Again, we've had years of litigation over the similar sorts of deferred actions put forth by President Obama.
I can already hear Republican attorney generals' typewriters clacking as they get ready to get their litigation out. And this is why I think that there's a certain deep cynicism attached to this move, coming when it comes right now in the height of an election that is really gearing up and where the president is clearly attempting to both mollify his base and potentially buy over voters, because it's inevitable that there's going to be a legal maelstrom surrounding this. The fact that we're having this discussion and all of this is an unknown, all but determines that there will be litigation. And look what happened to the Dreamers. I think it's worthwhile recalling that history. Remember, this happened because Congress was having a debate at the time about how they might handle the Dreamer question. And they hadn't done anything yet. And an election was coming. And so Obama decided to wave his magic wand and change immigration law by executive fiat. And he not only in doing that essentially killed any prospect of there being Dreamer legislation in Congress, because the reaction from Republicans was so sour over what the president had done, but he has since then left those Dreamers in legal limbo for 12 years. How does that help any of these people? I mean, even as we speak, so in 2022, the Fifth Circuit ruled that DACA was illegal for the kind of basic major questions doctrine. And they were saying the Congress did not provide the Department of Homeland Security the power to simply defer prosecutions for broad classes of individuals. Now, that is still pending appeal for the full Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. But what it means is that Dreamers are sitting here 12 years after the fact, and not only has there never been any legislation in that period of time, but they still don't have a legal answer to this. And I fear that Biden is now setting up another group of people, those who are brave enough to come out and go through this process, and maybe many will, except for I'd also wonder how many of them look to see what happened to the Dreamers who went out and declared themselves and now are on the record asking for this, and it's not clear that they are ever going to get a legal answer that gives them the protections that the president once promised they'd have.
This era of pen and phone governance, to use the phrase that President Obama used, is that it lets Congress off the hook. And it eliminates the political pressure for the elected legislators who actually make the laws in this country and who can figure out the compromises that are necessary to make them work. It lets them get away with doing nothing. And that is part of the difficulty, I think, with these dreamers and with DACA is there was a pretty good political pressure when President Obama acted to do something. And the fact that he did that by himself, I think, has aided the dysfunction in Congress over the immigration issue because Democrats who wanted some sort of policy like DACA decided that they didn't need to compromise with Republicans and give them any sort of border security or border wall or border funding because they decided they could get the policy that they wanted straight from the executive branch with no need to compromise. And we saw a similar sort of thing, Kim, with bump stocks. We've discussed this recently. The Supreme Court, after the mass shooting in Las Vegas in 2017, that gunman used bump stocks to get a high rate of fire. There was enormous pressure to do something about bump stocks. And when Congress was slow to react, President Trump, in this case, decided that he would urge on his administrative state, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, and they issued a regulation that redefined bump stocks as machine guns. Well, lo and behold, that got challenged, and the Supreme Court said, in what I think is a correct view of the law, a correct decision, that bump stocks, under the law as we have it today, are not machine guns. And so now we are back to square one, except now all of the political energy that we had several years ago to do something about bump stocks has evaporated. And you can look now at what's happening in the Senate. This is on Tuesday. Democrats moved to bring up a bill from New Mexico Senator Martin Heinrich to ban bump stocks. It was blocked by Senator Pete Ricketts, a Nebraska Republican. And I assume Republicans would say that this is some political gamesmanship because if Democrats really wanted some sort of legislation to ban bump stocks, they would get into a negotiating room and not try to pass something that already exists by unanimous consent. And fair enough. My narrow point here on this issue, Kim, is that this is what you end up with when Congress is let off the hook, is you throw everything to the courts, and then the policy that you think you've accomplished, maybe 4 or 5 years later, it evaporates. It evaporates on the say-so of a federal appeals court or the Supreme Court, and then Congress is back to square one and nothing actually gets done.
Yeah, I agree with you on all that. I would go even further and say this wasn't just letting Congress off the hook. This is Obama in his period of time and Biden now strafing the possibility of congressional action because by taking these executive orders, they so infuriate one side of the debate that it just poisons the well for anything more to be done. And this is almost the mantra or the repeated evidence of the Biden administration in his years when it comes to the immigration debate. Don't forget that he came into office and all this pleasant talk about how we need to come together and do something about the dreamers, truer words never spoken, only to then release this shoot the moon immigration policy that was so over the top, so demanding in everything it wanted, essentially straight up path to citizenship for millions of people, which of course is a non-starter with Republicans, coupled with his dismantling of border security that just opened the floodgates. I mean, the possibility right now of getting Republicans and Democrats into the room to have a discussion about sensible immigration reform. I mean, look what just happened late last year when there was a discussion about this and Senator James Langford was working on something. We got a little bit, but House Republicans were dug in on this. And now you have this, and I think it's similar. The reaction from Republicans in response to this order that came out this week is really, really angry because they view it as cynical. They view it as a president who's implementing this in the last few months before an election. Apparently, the application process is going to go live by the end of this summer, so people are already going to start piling into it. They view it as done in a way that's precisely made it difficult for a future Republican president to undo the program if he wants because of the political ramifications that would come back, the potential legal and regulatory complications of doing so. They view it as an affront to the law, whether that is a correct or incorrect reading of it. And they are that much less likely now to do anything, work with Democrats on anything for the cause of broader immigration reform, even though everyone in the country understands that our current system is not working, and only when Congress steps up can it be fixed.